Welcome to the April 25th edition of the PFF Forecast. This is a fantastic episode. Evan Silva from EstablishTheRun.com, our good friend, is joining us. Why? Because he's about to write his mock draft. This dude does better work than just about anyone else out there. We're going to talk the draft. We're going to talk about the number 3 overall pick, about a lot of draft props that we like. So it's a fantastic episode. We're also going to talk about Orlando Brown and the Chiefs. Let's rock. Before we get started, got to remind everyone, the draft show, the PFF draft show, is live on PFF.com all 3 days of the NFL draft. It starts on Thursday, 7 p.m., the night of the 29th of April. And as I said, it's on PFF.com. You don't have to go to YouTube. You go to PFF.com. You'll get a live draft tracker with all the PFF analysis, live grading as the picks are coming in. And of course, our beautiful faces. Chris is going to be there. Darius Butler is coming into Cincinnati. Mike
Steve
Leonard,
Palazzolo.
Austin Gale. Steve might be doing a demo for draft prospects newly picked on how to create a Jerry. It's going to be phenomenal.
I just watched the 1989 draft where Deion Sanders got drafted. It would be like the second time in history where somebody did such a display.
Deion's was pretty good. And Ian Harditz, our good buddy from the pregame shows, our senior fantasy analyst, he's going to be right over there, and he's going to be dropping some fantasy goodness for you. All of those shows. So it starts at 7 on Thursday. It starts at 6 p.m. on Friday. On Saturday at 11 a.m. And Sunday, there's a recap show that starts at noon. You won't want to miss it. And by the way, right now, the NFL Draft Guide, 30% off with promo code DRAFT30. And that works for any PFF subscription. PFF Edge is the one that gets you the draft guide. Of course, Elite will get you all of the betting tools and the DFS optimizer. So if you're preparing for next season, which you should be, go use DRAFT30 for 30% off at PFF.com. All right, we're going to have Evan on here in a second. I wanted to say a couple of things. First off, I want to shout out a lot of listeners came through. I was in New York City this weekend doing some work, and had an opportunity to meet some people who are really fond of you and don't hate me a ton.
I was going to ask what the distribution was. I feel like
there were a few, it was really cool to see, and hopefully, some of you are listening. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet a lot of you. And just know that not every single person thinks I'm a piece of shit.
I just interrupted you, but by the way, I've taken, hopefully people will see on this show today, that I've taken some of the comments, not the ones saying, not most of them, but the ones that say, don't talk over the guest. I took those a little seriously today. Mm-hmm. But I will say, every once in a while, I get the urge to go into those comments and defend you. Because they're always like, this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, if you don't understand George's shtick,
it's a good, here's the thing. It's a really good litmus test.
Yes.
You either get it or you don't. And if you don't get it, there's nothing I can do for you. So that was cool. This is going to be a good show. I will mention to everyone that our last mock draft is coming out tomorrow, or if you're listening to this on Monday, it is probably out. So you'll check that out. This is our final, what we would do in the draft. We've started talking about it. We're going to let Evan help us with a few final thoughts. Talk about, as I mentioned, the Orlando Brown stuff. And then we're going to close out the show. I have a surprise. I have a little surprise for everyone, so you want to stick around for that. But now we're going to get to Evan Silva. And before we get there, we're going to talk a lot about some draft props. And DraftKings and the DraftKings Sportsbook is a great place for you to go place those. So DraftKings, it's America's top-rated sportsbook, is giving you a wonderful opportunity to turn $1 into $100 if you use promo code PFF. You take $1, turn into $100 worth of free bets if a quarterback gets drafted first overall Thursday night. Gosh, as long as the outside the lines crew doesn't get in there and take a linebacker at 1, then is it Jeremy Schnaps?
By the way,
then we'll be in good shape.
did you see the Orlovsky tweet where he said he went through all like the Division I AA or lower quarterbacks who have been drafted in the first round, and they were all like not busts. So like Wentz being I think the worst one, but like Ken O'Brien and stuff. It's like and then somebody posted that the World War II airplane with all the bullet holes.
I personally think that's an infallible argument. So
as a Niners fan, you hope
I'm
that
praying.
young one Dan Orlovsky gets
praying. I'm praying. I will, of course, have many investments at DraftKings and the DraftKings Sportsbook. Come Thursday night, you should as well use promo code PFF. Go sign up. You must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, West Virginia. Only new customers are those that are eligible. Winnings are paid out in free bets. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Also, our friends at Underdog Fantasy. If you don't know about Underdog Fantasy, you need to go check them out. Their app is awesome. It's a place where you can play best ball and you can actually do some cool parlay props betting for like NBA and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. Go to Underdog Fantasy, download the app, play season-long and playoff best ball, and use promo code PFF, deposit $10, and then get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's an amazing, it's basically $10 for a draft guide. Go do it, and then have a ton of fun at Underdog Fantasy.
They were very thoughtful with the current draft situation. They have suspended slow drafts because they wouldn't get done before the draft, and it's not fair. What a thoughtful company.
They shouldn't be underdogs anymore, personally.
Favorites.
And now, Evan Silva. It is our distinct honor to welcome back our old friend, Evan Silva from EstablishTheRun.com. He's had some really good stuff out lately. The podcast that you did about the Bears regime, by the way, Evan, absolutely fantastic. People should go listen to that. All the good content that you and the fellas put out on EstablishTheRun.com. Evan, it's been a little while. How you living?
Doing well. Excited to talk ball with two of my favorite people in the industry. Have so much respect for your guys' opinions. And, often we agree, sometimes we disagree, like on the Bills last year, Eric Eager. Needed to call you out. And also Timo Risque. Wanted to call out Timo Risque for missing on the Bills. But, it's all love. Timo Risque did really well on getting Aaron Rodgers really high in his MVP projections. And I wound up jumping on that in like week 13, week 14 and hit big on it. I mean, I think I got it like plus 500 or something. So shout out to you guys. Thanks for improving my bankroll.
We had a lot of good discussion about the Bills going into last year, and I think it would be very interesting to watch them this year. I think Allen's season was like a super high at the beginning. It wasn't particularly high for a good stretch there.
But then there was like a stretch at the end of the season where they had so much value on the betting market. Imagine how out to lunch the market was when they had Buffalo as like 1-point underdogs in Arizona against the Niners with Nick Mullins. It's like, what was going on there? And then they steamed Pittsburgh on that Sunday or Monday night. And then it was, and then they went into, they were a home game against Miami who had to win to get in the playoffs. Boat raced them, boat raced Baltimore in the playoffs. They had a really interesting season where, yes, Evan, even if I was wrong in week one, I stayed more steady during the middle of the year and then made it all back in weeks like 11 to 18.
I will say this. I was very happy with the Bills this year. You know why? Because they helped, Evan, to cement my pillar of the season, which was that the Pittsburgh Steelers suck.
Yeah.
Nothing, perhaps there were a few things in life that gave me as much excitement as them destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football.
Here's a good question, Silva. So what does, just as we brief, because I do think that this is trademark the next big problem in football. Of those 2018 quarterbacks, do all of the worthy ones get a contract extension? Lamar, Baker, Josh Allen, and
not Rosen?
No, not Rosen. Who is the fourth, or who is the fifth one? Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold won't. I hope not. I mean, For all that's holy, let's assume not.
Well, the first three will. The fourth one, it's really interesting. The Panthers, immediately after they traded for Sam Darnold, like announced that they were going to pay that fifth-year option for Sam Darnold, which would be like $19 million. That's a pretty big investment in a quarterback who has been unsuccessful to this point for a variety of reasons. That wouldn't count as an extension, obviously, but and then it was today, I think, they announced that they're not going to make that decision until after the draft. So that was an interesting bit of posturing by the Panthers, who were at number 8 and in position to potentially draft a falling quarterback among these big 4 or 5.
Well, okay, so you say they will get one. And again, this is a big discussion topic because there are going to be teams who, and people we like, people we respect, have constantly brought up the whole, if you look at all the quarterbacks that have been taken since X, X save 2 of them are gone, right? And I think, again, the big I think we're all in agreement now that taking quarterbacks high is an edge, especially except for special cases like maybe Atlanta, or where you have a quarterback where or even Green Bay, I think, to some degree. But then when it's Baker, when it's Lamar, when it's Josh Allen, I do think Josh Allen has the best chance among them to be worth that big contract. But like if it's somebody like Lamar, if Lamar has a season, let's say 10% worse than last season, like I think we can all agree that he's valuable and a starter caliber player in the league, but is he worth $40 million per year? And I think the same thing can be asked about Baker Mayfield, because all of these things, it was never how Goff performed on his rookie deal. It was never how Wentz performed on his rookie deal. It's, and to an extent, like we haven't seen, Mahomes pass the rookie deal yet, money-wise. It's always like what happens when you pay them. And like, are we ready as a football community to have those really tough discussions yet?
Baltimore isn't. I'll tell you that. Like the one that I think would be the hardest would be Lamar in Baltimore, because of what he
won an MVP, what he means to that city.
And I think that's always the tough thing, is we look at it and we go, oh, we don't have any, skin in the game from a team and a city standpoint. Like, we're not making money from fans coming to games. And I think I would say Lamar is a lock to get an extension. That would be
they're all going to get extensions. Yeah. Baker, Lamar, absolutely. Josh Allen,
yeah. Baker probably. To me, I think Baker has the best chance not, and here's why.
Yeah,
I don't think that Baker does not have. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson each have a particular skill that is somewhat unique in the NFL.
Yeah.
Certainly Lamar does. I think Josh Allen has maybe, if not one that's particularly unique, a couple that are 99th percentile.
What if you were the Jaguars and you were offered Lamar Jackson for the first pick? What would you do?
I would not take it.
Because I think that's.
What would you do, Evan?
I would not take it, and I'm a Lamar stan.
I am too. I like Lamar a lot. But that's like, would you take it? You wouldn't take it for Baker either, obviously. No. Not even close. So that's really the rub. That's the difficulty, because if you have one of these quarterbacks and he's good, your team is 11-5 like Cleveland and like Baltimore are, and you're in the 20s, and it would probably require you to trade pick 29 or whatever you are, plus your quarterback, just to get into that one spot. And I don't think, I think everybody's so wise to that now, right? Like, everybody's like, wait, if that's you're taking, and this again, it's the whole issue of a sure thing, which we'll talk about Orlando Brown in a second, like sure thing versus not a sure thing. But when you adjust for price, it's much like that tweet where it's like, hey, I don't like Kansas City -3 in the Super Bowl. I'd much rather take a sure thing like plus 14.5 at -5,000. And it's like, oh, wait, we did finally see the Chiefs lose by multiple scores. Nothing's a sure thing. And once you adjust for price, they're all sort of, I don't think people really kind of understand that curve yet.
You think Baker's a sure thing to get an extension of?
No, but I love the way that he played in the first half, or in the second half of last season, in his first year in a new system with, essentially no training camp, no preseason, no OTAs. and he took off in the second half of the year. They sort of unleashed him a little bit, and that was without Odell Beckham, with Jarvis Landry playing through multiple injuries. And now he's heading into his second season under Kevin Stefanski, who I believe is one of the best coaches in the NFL, with, you know, an elite offensive line returning, Odell Beckham back, Jarvis Landry healthier. I think that, you know, like I bet him at 40-1 to win MVP. I mean, I think that he could really take off in this second season in the system.
Yeah, there's also the biases both in the marketplace for players, but also in the perception space for top picks. So the 40-1 MVP, I think, you know, it's much the same reason we always drag Dak a little bit in the public perception, because he's a former fourth rounder. Like, there's always that cloud that hangs over him where, you know, it's why Anthony Harris and Eric Wilson got barely nothing from the Eagles. It's like we all want to, like, sort of take our biases from way back in the day and conform to them. When if we didn't like a player way back in the day and he performs well, we're almost always like a little hesitant to really buy into how well he's playing at the time.
Let me I really like that MVP bet, Evan, and here's something that I think is absolutely fucking hilarious. At DraftKings Sportsbook, players with a better chance to win MVP, according to DraftKings Sportsbook odds: Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, Christian McCaffrey, Ryan Tannehill, Justin Herbert. Now, I think there's a couple that could get a little bit of buzz there, but like some of those are ridiculous in my opinion. Here's what I will say though. The Cleveland Browns offensive line was the best offensive line in football last year. And your point about Kevin Stefanski, I 100% agree with. And to me, it's a little bit of the Jared Goff thing. Jared Goff looked better than Baker did when the Los Angeles Rams were firing on all cylinders with a great offensive line and Sean McVay just torching teams with his scheme. But then all of a sudden those things eroded around him and he was a disaster and or just not very good. And I think the interesting thing with Baker will be, do you feel that if those things lessen by, say, 20%, is he good enough to keep you going? So I guess we'll find out this year.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when you're looking for an MVP bet, you are looking at, number one, plays on a team that's going to win a lot of games, plays quarterback, and you're looking at the best odds you can get. And that was sort of my approach with Josh Allen last year, who wound up finishing number 2 in MVP voting. I thought the Bills would be good. He played quarterback, and I thought he had a chance to take a big leap because of what the Bills did around him. And right now, what is around Baker Mayfield is really, really positive for his outlook. I also really like Matt Ryan at 80-1.
I was just about to say.
As a longer shot MVP bet. I don't want to go too off the rails here because I don't think we're doing an MVP show. But Matt Ryan at 80-1, I think, is an excellent bet. Arthur Smith is a talent maximizer, I believe. They're going to install a lot more play action. The coaching staff upgrade from Dirk Cutter to Arthur Smith, I think, is immense. Julio's coming. Julio, although he only played like half the season last year, still among the NFL leaders in yards per route run. Calvin Ridley is a baller. Hayden Hurst, they might add Kyle Pitts. They're bringing back their 3 best offensive linemen. And then the 2 guys that they, quote unquote, lost, Alex Mack and James Carpenter. I don't even think James Carpenter is signed with anyone. Alex Mack is like 36. They're inserting Matt Hennessy, who was a high draft pick by them, and Matt Gano, who they gave a second-round tender. So I like everything that is going on around Matt Ryan. 80-1 is absurd.
Ryan Tannehill is 25-1. Matt Ryan is 80-1. Look, I don't recommend doing drugs. That would be my response to that. I think the 80. We've talked about this before. Going from Dirk Cutter to Arthur Smith, kind of like going from Cincinnati to New York City for the weekend, as I can attest to.
A deep cut there.
But we're not doing an MVP show.
Let's talk briefly about the trade that went down this past weekend.
Yeah.
How dare you? You're going to do this before the Mac Jones number 3 overall pick.
Yes, we have to crescendo to the most important topic, okay?
Okay. I'm going to try and contain myself.
Look, George, since my Kansas City Chiefs lost in the Super Bowl, we've been almost all 49ers all the time on this show.
That's what this is about, Evan. This is not about a crescendo. This is about selfish ego over here. Okay, you came in with the Bills talk, and now he wants to bring it back to the Chiefs.
Because I'm actually
I want to talk about this trade because I think it's interesting how the NFL media industrial complex covered this trade.
Yes,
and I think they got it wrong.
Yes, well, and I think that is also why the Ravens continue to win over the league every single time, because when you look at, like, they re-signed Tashawn Bowser for like 4 years, $6.5 million a year, and let Ngakoue and Judon go, when Bowser's every bit as productive as those guys, and you're getting him for a rookie deal contract right after having seen him for 4 years, and everybody's like, oh, why are they like? Yes, Evan, you're absolutely right, and this is why. So everybody's saying,
so let's recap the trade here, and then you can go into it. So the Baltimore Ravens traded Orlando Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs, along with the 58th pick in this year's draft, a second-round pick, and a sixth-round pick in next year's draft. They got in return the 31st pick from the Kansas City Chiefs this season in the first round, a third-round pick, the 94th overall in this year's draft, and a fourth-round pick, number 136 in this year's draft, along with a 2022 fifth-rounder. And it was, as you mentioned, a resounding, every single social media account praising the Kansas City Chiefs.
And they, even our own at PFF, said Kansas City got a stud, and that's okay. Like, assuming like his grades and everything are mostly his play and not that of the Ravens scheme. That's true. But the price is immense. I mean,
yeah, but also social media account. I'm talking about like people. Social media accounts for companies, their job is to engage people.
Yeah. but that's what I mean. But like the thing is so somebody came at me and was like, the Ravens just traded the left tackle to a team that they're chasing in the AFC. How is that good for the Ravens? And the numbers are what the numbers are. I essentially calculated that Orlando Brown is costing about 6 times as much as the collection of trade picks is worth. And he's going conservatively probably be 2 to 2.5 times better than what you would expect from the collection of picks. So essentially, you're getting 3 times the markup for whatever certainty you're buying in Orlando Brown, which I don't think is that high, because Orlando Brown has 870 career snaps at left tackle. He played in an offense with a really good run-pass ratio if you're a lineman, and he played with a quarterback for whom defensive ends and outside linebackers are scared of as hell of pass rushing. So, like, people are acting like this is such a sure thing over a draft lineman, when I would argue that, yes, he's played right tackle in the league, so the floor, if he really stinks at left tackle, he can play right tackle, all this kind of stuff. The floor is certainly higher, but the median, this is a win for Baltimore.
Evan, your thoughts?
I have so much to say about this that I feel like I'm going to forget some things that I want to say and then regret it later. But the way that I would begin with this is that, first of all, it's just, I don't get this notion that you can't trade with certain teams. You want to limit your market. Like, you can't trade within your division. You can't trade with, teams that you're competing with for in the AFC. And then all of a sudden you can only trade with like 6 teams, and you've limited your market, the trade market for a player. That's completely illogical thinking, and yet it is pervasive throughout the NFL and the way that the NFL is covered, number one. Number two, Orlando Brown has not – there's a reason that Orlando Brown was a third-round pick, okay? And he was, really good in the Big 12, but he's a genuinely poor athlete. And
that's why he fell.
He's not a left tackle caliber athlete. And when in Baltimore, not only was the run pass ratio in favor of the offensive line, and they can actually get away in Baltimore with having like average to below average offensive linemen because of that. In part, they also use 2 tight end sets and even 3 tight end sets at some of the highest rates in the league. So you have a help blocker for Orlando Brown. And then also just the notion of trading a player whose contract is about to be up for a bounty is, very favorable, not only from, mainly from a salary cap standpoint. And there is also this notion out there that all of a sudden the cap is going to explode in 2022. You really think that the owners are going to allow that to happen? No, the owners run the show. Unfortunately, the owners run the show in the NFL, and from a power standpoint. And I don't think they're going to allow the salary cap to explode in 2022. So all of a sudden, the Chiefs have gone through salary cap issues in the past. And it has forced them to move on from some pretty good players. And I think they're about to encounter some serious salary cap issues in the forthcoming future. They're going to have to pay Orlando Brown a massive contract to keep him. He now holds a ton of leverage.
So much
over
leverage.
them.
Yeah.
And so I tweeted about this, and I said the Chiefs are clearly taking on the most risk in this deal for all those reasons that I just mentioned. And I was attacked by Chiefs fans, of course, muted all of them.
You just got to go straight to the block, by the way. The block is more aggressive. I feel like it's way better.
Yeah, but I've gotten away from the block. I'm more on the mute. But this was a very risky deal for Kansas City. And the way that the NFL media industrial complex covered this trade, I think was not proper.
The
and
edge
also,
remains.
The last time that Orlando Brown, who was a very limited athlete, played left tackle was in the Big 12.
His athleticism score in our metrics is 3.5 standard deviations worse than average, the worst one in our database. Bobby Hart levels of athleticism, but
Orlando Brown also, let's not act like he was an all-pro last year. He was the 25th highest graded tackle.
Yeah.
Playing at right now.
I will say this though, right? So the only thing that's positive about this, in my opinion, is the second best offense that Orlando Brown could have fallen to was Kansas City's. It's just the Ravens are the easiest offense to play in if you're a lineman, and Eric Fisher's nothing special. And he's been fine there. The problem is you can apply that logic to whomever you want to draft at 31. For that player at 31 is making $3 million a year. Eventually, now here's the thing: I don't think they have nowhere near. Orlando Brown doesn't have anywhere near the leverage that Laramie Tunsil did, because in the minds of everybody in the league, this is the 45th pick, even though it's a first round pick, sort of, by name, but. The worst case, think about the case scenarios here. We did this with Dak as well. If Orlando Brown's terrible, it was a bad trade. If Orlando Brown is average, it's like starting pitching in baseball. You're still going to have to pay $15 million a year for it, right? And if Orlando Brown is amazing, you have no leverage over one of the most important positions on the entire team. So none of the three outcomes in this trade for Kansas City make them better off than when they were what they were before the trade happened. That's what makes it irritating for me. I don't get that.
Well, I also think it's super weird to go, okay, it was really an easy situation for him in Baltimore. Well, the Chiefs have a similarly wonderful system. Now, it's not quite as great as Lamar Jackson, but Patrick Mahomes is fantastic. You should be able to get away with not overpaying for the tackle position. And they are, in my opinion, dramatically overreacting to having really bad tackle play in one game. And it is causing them, again, I think they have made a multitude of really bad decisions. Frank Clark, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round, trading for Orlando Brown, and they're paying. You cannot continue to make minus EV bets when you have Patrick Mahomes and you're going to pay him everything. You have to make smart, shrewd plays. That's how you sustain. That's literally how the Patriots were a dynasty.
Well, and the main, to me, if I'm assessing all of these moves, and somebody was like, well, Frank Clark got a sack in the Super Bowl after 3.5 seconds. It's your reasoning for these players can never be, even if they suck, Patrick Mahomes is so good that we're still going to be in it. That seems to be the reasoning on everything, Evan. And I just don't, to me, that's we've seen the Patriots happen, and we've seen everything else happen, which is New Orleans with Breeze, Packers with Rodgers, Falcons with Ryan. Like literally all these other teams, they get one shot, and the Chiefs have had their one shot. And the team that sort of has continued to defy all these things is the team that doesn't necessarily make. Now, they don't pick the right players all the time, but no one does. But like they don't make negative EV moves like this, Evan.
Yeah, I mean the Patriots for years, and nobody talked about this enough, but they never crushed the draft, but they would crush the compensatory pick process. They would make these pick swap trades where they would move down 30 spots from the third round into the fourth round and get like an impact role player, and still the probability of them hitting on that pick was the same as if they had drafted at 98th versus 127. And we don't really see the Chiefs carving out those advantages. Again, I think Orlando Brown is probably going to be fine as their left tackle. But, man, they gave up significant draft capital to get him, and they're going to have to pay him a big contract, and that creates a ton of risk. And the Ravens really alleviated a ton of risk by moving on from him because they got the draft capital and they're not going to have to pay that massive contract.
I mean, absolutely. And you don't even have to look at that far to Baltimore to see, we think of risk as on the field risk, which I think the Chiefs, if you look at the two floors, are mitigating. If you're cost agnostic, they're mitigating risk a little bit. Although this time last year, the Chiefs had a left tackle who is about as good as Orlando Brown. The reason they lost the Super Bowl was because that guy got hurt. You're not preventing that this time this year. Like, it's silly, sort of, they all gravitate.
You're actually preventing building depth, which to me was the reason. They didn't lose the Super Bowl because their left tackle and right tackle got hurt. They lost the Super Bowl because they didn't have adequate backups to put in there. They did not have any sort of, depth across the position. You look at the Saints. I always talk about this with the Saints. They, back when they would have injuries on the offensive line, they were so good at. They had guys that could move, they could bump out, they could replace in the center. They never really suffered there, and that's how you sustain, right? Because injuries are going to happen.
But I think it's even worse than what you just said, because I do think they drafted Lucas Niang in round 3. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif was a starter for them in the Super Bowl, and Mitchell Schwartz was out since week 6. They had adequate backups for most circumstances. They just dealt with a tail risk event, which was both tackles get hurt, one right guard gets hurt, one other guy opts out, and then another guy opts out. Like, they're responding to something that's no one's fault, right? There was nothing. It was sort of a black swan event, but now they're spending all this money to sort of make sure that never happens again. When in reality, if like Joe Thuney gets hurt, it's happening again. Like they can't prevent it, right? They can only build a scheme, and I think the big part of the Super Bowl was that Andy Reid, for the first time in God knows how long, wasn't able to adjust for whatever reason during a game. But that, to me, is where I would have focused more of my resources. Yeah, I'm fine with them taking one high-end offensive lineman. That, generally speaking, is okay. But, like, now you're going to have $35 million per year on one side of your offensive line when, like, who's going to start right tackle for them? Mike Remmers? Like, Remmers was a good signing for them last year, and he played mostly well throughout the year. But it's just, now it's like, do you need 2 Mike Remmers now to absolutely mitigate, the Super Bowl issue?
I think that the moral of the story, our takeaway here, is that teams are very, very human. They're very reactionary. You remember the playoff game where Derrick Henry just trampled the Ravens. The Ravens were in position; they were the best team in the NFL. Derrick Henry comes out and tramples them, and then the next offseason, and Josh Hermsmeyer, our buddy, could speak to this. They spent the next offseason, the Ravens did, and the Ravens are maybe the smartest organization in the NFL, dumping resources into run stoppers. And, they wound up not getting to where they wanted to go. But even the smartest organizations can be very, very reactionary to one game. And, so yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
The betting markets did not change as a result of this. No, neither win total changed, neither Super Bowl championship odd changed because of this. A lot of these moves are not first order moves, but ultimately in the tail events like we saw in the Super Bowl.
I do think it's interesting. There's definitely, at least in the media, like they overreact to if a player is included in a trade, that player, right? It like that's why this got such great publicity for the Chiefs, because everyone knows who Orlando Brown is. People can talk about Orlando Brown. The 31st pick, no one, that you can't put a picture of that guy up on a tweet or on Instagram. And like but that's a legitimate, I think, advantage for teams like the Ravens. And Evan, you said something that I thought was funny about like, oh, there's teams we can't trade. If we're competing against these teams, we can't trade. You're competing against everybody, okay? But it should be, I think, a red flag if a team as smart as the Ravens is willing to be the one sending the player to you. That, to me, should be a little bit of a red flag.
I think if Cleveland or Baltimore is trading with you, you probably should go over it a few times.
I think the Ravens believe that Orlando Brown's success was very large part due to their scheme. Yep. I mean, I think that's just a fact, and I think if you could get truth serum on Eric DaCosta, he would tell you that.
Okay, we're going to talk now. I've been waiting very patiently for you to get your rocks off about the Chiefs. We're going to talk about the number 3 overall pick. I've been waiting for a long time to talk to you about this, Evan. And I'll just kind of give you the floor because I want to know right now, April 25th, the 49ers are in the 3rd pick. That's where the draft starts. What do you think you know? What do you make of the whole situation as it stands right now?
Well, I'm a bettor. And so if I'm betting this and I'm looking at the odds, and I think it's Trey Lance at plus 300 and Mac Jones at minus 167,
yep,
I'm willing to take the leap to, based on the odds, an odds-based bet on Trey Lance. However, if I'm doing a mock draft today, which I'm about to do one here in the next couple of days, I'm putting Mac Jones at number 3 to San Francisco. So that sounds like a cop-out, and maybe it is. But I think that that's the smartest way to play this. There's no question that around the league, like almost everyone believes that Mac Jones is going to be the 49ers pick at number 3. But I think that there is some sentiment within the 49ers organization based on things that I've heard, based on things that I've read, that Trey Lance should be the pick. But that's not necessarily from Kyle Shanahan. And at the end of the day, I think that Kyle Shanahan is the top decision maker in the 49ers organization.
Really?
I do not think that Justin Fields is seriously in play at number 3.
Why?
And that's mostly based on what I've heard.
And by the way, there was a great podcast. I don't know if you know Rob Pizzola, but he has a podcast with BetStamp where he was talking about how your mock draft, he was charting how when you put down your mock draft on Twitter and how it changed numbers. So like it might be one of those where the Trey Lance plus 300, which you and I took last week on Friday.
Yes, the syndicate has grown.
The syndicate has diversified a little bit.
At first, there was only one in the Wolf Pack, was Justin Fields, and now we have added Trey Lance.
But I would imagine, and again, we talked about this number and how it's traveled around a number of times. I would imagine I would imagine that Trey Lance at plus 300, it probably doesn't close there. I think it closes, and close is weird because once the name is picked, but let's say Thursday morning, Wednesday night, I'll call that close. By that time, I do think what Evan is saying is probably true, where you're going to end up with Jones at like -2.
Yeah.
I think you're going to end up with Fields maybe in that plus 300 range. And I think Trey Lance is probably going to end up plus, like, let's say 225 maybe. What is the number, Evan, that you would consider? Because you're not laying $1.70 for Mac, right? I mean, at this point, or is that something you consider?
No, I mean, I still, involve some feel into this, and it still strains my personal belief that the 49ers or any NFL team would, essentially end up surrendering 3 first-round picks and a third-round pick to go get Mac Jones over Justin Fields and Trey Lance, who both clearly have higher ceilings, I think, than Mac Jones. So there is some feel here, involved in my own betting preferences.
Let me ask you.
But when I do my mock, I'm probably going to have Mac Jones going number 3 to San Francisco, and I'm going to hate myself for putting him there.
I'm glad you're doing that. Okay, as someone that deeply cares about this selection for more than just monetary reasons, but I'm glad you're doing that because you're giving the people on this podcast now have an opportunity. If you want to bet Mac Jones, and I encourage you to do so to help me from a karma perspective, you can get him for 167. And when Evan releases his mock, you're not going to get him for 167. It's probably, as you said, it's going to get maybe out to 2, even steeper. My question would be this though. You said, Evan, okay, everyone in the league is saying they think it's going to be Mac Jones. But everyone's saying the same thing about, for example, the second overall pick, which is Zach Wilson, and he's minus 5,000. Everyone's saying the same thing about Trevor Lawrence at the first overall pick, and he's minus, 10,000? Mac Jones is getting everything said about him going to third overall, and he's minus 167. So why is that? Why is it that everyone's saying this in the league, and yet he's minus 167?
I mean, I think it's in large part because they can't even comprehend it because, for the reasons stated previously. And also just that, as you get further down the draft, there's much less certainty with every pick. So that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, this is an exacta in many ways, right? And you're sort of looking at that as it is like a low, like to me, the bigger anomaly is the fact that Zach Wilson is minus 5,000 to be the second pick, right? Because to me, and granted, we have him at really good numbers, but like to me, I'm nervous still about that pick. And even though the implied is like 80, near 98%, I'm nervous about that pick. I can understand. And I think Drew and Andy talked about, they were on with the Circa odds maker, and he said, for the book to win on Thursday, Justin Fields being the pick is the way that the book wins. So they have exposure on Mac Jones, and it feels like, again, there. I don't know what the bet composition is, but I do think that what Evan's saying is 100% correct, which is like they're just. Can you imagine being an odds maker and laying a number like minus 400 for Mac Jones, and then it coming out and it just being Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State, and we're all like, oh no shit, like that's what it should have been the whole time, and I think what they're probably doing is laying a number where I think most of the Mac Jones money probably came when it was plus 100 or better. And I don't know if anybody's laying minus. Like I think that's the answer. No one's laying minus 170 anymore for him. Like Evan isn't, and I'm not, and I'm scared that he's the pick. Like I agree with Evan 100% that like I agree with the fact that there's a very real chance he's the pick, and I won't lay that number.
Why do you think? I mean, so Evan, who would you choose?
I would choose Justin Fields. I'm not a great quarterback no one's a good quarterback evaluator, by the way. Mm-hmm. No one is. Not even people in the NFL. I mean, if you look at the hit rate of, first round quarterbacks historically, it's like 33%.
Which is why I take a linebacker.
That these guys end up being actual franchise quarterbacks. And I like Justin Fields second best among all the quarterbacks, but I remove my own personal feeling from, when I'm making mock drafts. I really think that there's a disconnect between draft Twitter and NFL media and how they feel about Justin Fields and how NFL teams feel about Justin Fields. I think that, I think that there are concerns behind the scenes about Justin Fields. I think that a lot of it is coming from the University of Georgia and, where he transferred away from. I'm not saying that it's right. I have no idea whether or not it's right, but I don't think that teams have a great vibe about Justin Fields right now. I think he's going to slip in the draft. Like right now, his draft pick position prop on DraftKings is 4.5. I like the over on that.
By the way, can I give a hypothesis? This was something that we talked about the other day. Fields has the biggest percentage of pressured plays where he turns them into sacks or runs. And I think what an NFL evaluator says, and especially, and again, I don't want to want to give anything to Shanahan that's not true or that, but I'm just sort of thinking about Shanahan is very much kind of wants to be a part of it, right? Like he wants that sort of, player who will do the steps the way he wants to, will do, and improvisation. That's why I always think Mike Holmgren is one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL, because he was able to build a structure where Brett Favre could be as wild as possible and still have success. And I think a notch below that is somebody who builds a brilliant system, but kind of gets spazzy when a guy does the unexpected. And I think Lance didn't have that in his data. Mac Jones certainly doesn't have that in his data. And Fields, for as good as he is, and I say I don't weigh this as nearly that highly, but maybe somebody who is like, my offense is the bee's knees, and how dare you, with a modicum of pressure, deviate from that. Maybe that's what the thought process is, not only with Shanahan, but around the league, because there are people that I know who either know somebody or actually have like a not first round grade on Fields, which blows my mind. But maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like, I spend hours and hours and hours building this scheme, and this player freelances too much. And the really great coaches, in my opinion, the Reeds, the Holmgrens, they do a good job of living with that and thriving with it. But some coaches don't.
And the 49ers have gone out of their way to build an offense and personnel, groupings where these guys are insane after the catch. They make the quarterback's job easier. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, great after-catch players. And what Kyle Shanahan really wants is just a point guard, John Stockton, a distributor. And I remember it was, I think, immediately after the season almost, we were having a discussion. I can't remember if it was on a show or in our DM thread, but we were talking, like George was like, 49ers need to go get Deshaun Watson. And look, it doesn't look like Deshaun Watson is going to get traded at all at this point. But George really wanted the 49ers to go get Deshaun Watson, and I totally understood that. But Eric and I kind of pushed back on it, on the reality of that happening, because Deshaun Watson is such an out-of-structure quarterback, and Kyle Shanahan, at least we think, wants his quarterback to play within structure. And and Mac Jones is a within structure quarterback, and Trey Lance and Justin Fields might be more, playmaker quarterbacks. So I don't know. It's a really interesting discussion. It's obviously, the most interesting discussion in the 2021 NFL draft.
So there's a couple of things there. The first, and I think this is a really interesting discussion about Shanahan and, I think by extension, a little bit of Lynch. So this is why I thought, I agree with you 100%, that right now, if you were going to place one bet on the NFL draft, that betting Trey Lance 3-1 is a phenomenal bet. Because I agree with everything that you just said. Kyle Shanahan is the most confident, you could call him cocky play caller and scheme designer in the NFL. And you know what? He fucking deserves it, because he's amazing. Yeah. But he has also seen that he has had to lift on his shoulders and carry across the tepid waters.
Well, the cross on his back.
Literally carrying Jimmy Garoppolo and other inferior quarterbacks to success. And so I think he is looking for a guy that can both deliver within structure, but also when Dante Hightower is coming off the edge unblocked, can step to the side. Or when he gets hit one time in the pocket, his ankles don't absolutely collapse. Or when the guy is wide open on a post down the fucking field in Miami for the goddamn Super Bowl, he can lay it in there.
And I'll add to this a little bit more context, because this is the second side of the argument. So, everybody talks about the influence that Mike Shanahan, Kyle's dad, has on the situation. And Mike Shanahan, as an offensive coordinator or a head coach, has 3 Super Bowl wins. One of them was with Steve Young and the 49ers in 1994. That was, again, Steve Young's probably a top 5 quarterback in NFL history, in my opinion, but also not a structure guy. Very much a 70% completion percentage guy while also rushing for like 6 yards a carry. I mean, so again, you see that high level. If Mike Shanahan had John Elway for 2 years and they won the Super Bowls there.
On the back of Terrell Davis.
When Mike Shanahan got into trouble, it was when he reverted to what we're talking about. Hey, if I can just they built a great defense in Denver. You know who the quarterback was? Jake Plummer. And they go 13-3, and they couldn't beat New England. They couldn't beat Indianapolis. So what did he do? And again, this didn't work, but it's similar. What did they do in 2006? 2005, they're 13-3. They trade up for Jay Cutler, exactly, in the draft. And again, what is Jay Cutler? Jay Cutler was like a small, like Vanderbilt's not a small school, but it's like a smallish school and like Jay Cutler's not Jimmy G like. He's not, do everything right guy. He's the wild, and again, so I think of when people are like, oh, Mike Shanahan has a lot of input here. I'm like, do you really know what that means? Because in Mike Shanahan's experience, he failed with the Steve Berlines and the Steve Bonos and the Brian Griese's the Jake Plumbers. He had success with the Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
John Beck. Remember
John
the year
Beck.
that
Thank
he was
you.
like all in on John Beck? By the way, Mike Shanahan belongs in the Hall of Fame.
I agree. I don't think he will because
he
of the way it ended.
He was the originator of running backs don't matter.
Yeah.
Trades away Clinton Portis for a DB. I mean, you guys should hire him at PFF.
Actually,
Mike Shanahan, he's currently unemployed.
Mike Shanahan is so first off, when we were in the Super Bowl in Miami, Mike Shanahan came over to our place, our bachelor pad, so to speak, and kicked it with us. And he clearly, I'll say this. So you can go back and watch the video. I don't know if there's anything in there that's like particularly enlightening as far as this situation goes, but it was very clear that he is a part of Kyle Shanahan's process. So while you might say, oh, crazy like LeVar Ball, it's not LeVar Ball coming in and being like, this is what's going down. And you're like, okay, you're full of shit. Like, I do think that Mike Shanahan's input would matter to Kyle. I am curious, Evan, though, why you think it's Kyle Shanahan that has the say and not John Lynch.
That's a good. I mean, I would say that that's just based on my general sense of what's going on there. I think that, John Lynch does have a say, but I think that he defers to Kyle. But that's just my sense of what's going on there. I guess I should put more thought into that, but that's just my sense of what's going on in San Francisco.
Yeah, but it's such a good question, though, and I think that I think it makes sense that the play caller would have the say when it comes to that. I mean, the other interesting, we didn't even talk about this. The last time Shanahan was a head coach, when his team traded a bounty of picks to the to the St. Louis Rams to go up and get a quarterback. Now, he didn't have other choices, but the guy he chose was an athletic, like superstar Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in RG3 and wasn't the distributor type. But again, it's such an interesting discussion because we can sort of walk ourselves into circles. And currently, right now, Mac Jones is minus 167, so he seems to defy. Evan, what is like there's a ton of narratives here. There are a ton of like players who are like earmarked for certain teams. Kyle Pitts to Atlanta, Patrick Surtain to Dallas. Even Sewell as a trade up candidate for the LA Chargers. What's one player team pairing that you believe is more likely than, like, we're not giving any mind to, that other people are, or that other people aren't giving any mind to, that you see as you do your mock draft and you're like, oh my God, this makes a lot more sense than I thought, and no one's talking about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that Jalen Phillips, the edge out of Miami, Florida, is going to go higher than people think. And I think he's going to end up going in that early teens range. And that could be the Chargers at 13. It could be the Vikings at 14.
Yep.
And right now, if you look at his draft slot prop, it's like 21 and a half.
Yep.
And I think he's going to beat that by like 6 picks. I think he's going to go early. I think that if he had a cleaner background, he might be a top 10 guy. But even with some injury and off-field stuff, I think he's going to go really, really early. He is, I think, easily the premier pass rush prospect in this draft. The other guy, like Kwity Paye, is kind of like small and squatty, and Gregory Rousseau has all these question marks, hasn't played in 2 years.
Bad athlete too.
I think that Jalen Phillips is the prototype, and he's going to be treated like that in the draft.
Yeah, that's a really. I mean,
even with the concussion stuff.
Again, if he didn't have that stuff, I think he would be in the top 10.
Yeah, I have a little bit of Phillips,
number 8 to Carolina.
Phillips to first defensive lineman taken. When I look at some of the comps that we have in our college to pro system, it's Jared Allen is what comp, Terrell Suggs, and this might not be a big deal anymore, but Frank Clark, Michael Johnson.
Frank Clark is actually in our the PFF NFL draft guide.
It's amazing how things come together nicely there, and he's a standard deviation better than average as far as athleticism. I like that. Obviously this is another one. It's plus 200 if you think he's the first defensive lineman taken. I think in a draft like this, where a position like running back is always like this, but in a position without like a Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts or Rashawn or Sewell, the favorite's almost a terrible bet in all of these, right? Like I think Barmore is another one for this particular bet where just because he plays a different position, but he's grouped in with the defensive lineman, if some team's like, look, we just need to get a run-stuffing defensive tackle, and he goes first, it might not be because he's a better prospect than Paye, Phillips, Rousseau, or anybody like that, but just because he plays a different position. So, I do like that. I like that one a lot, Evan. I do have a bet on Phillips being first defensive lineman taking. I think it's great.
He would make a ton of sense to the Dolphins at 18 too. That really should be like his floor almost. I mean, that's where I think he's going. I think he's going in the teens, probably in the early teens.
Yeah, that's a good one. What do you think? So, what do you think about corner? Because corner has evolved substantially since open. I mean, Surtain and Fairley were both about $125. Horn was like 8-1 to be first corner, and now he's like 7-1 or lower. Oh, geez, he's plus 350 to be the first defender taken. I see some people who are saying Horn's floor is like pick 12. Where does that leave Surtain?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, Surtain, to me, it's interesting because I think the narrative is Surtain is maybe the less risky corner, but Horn has the potential, maybe the ceiling. Yeah. His measurables were insane, and so that, to me, it's interesting because I think both these guys are getting a lot of Dallas love, and I'm curious what you think about some of the trades, Evan, because there are going to be a few, and one that keeps sticking out to me is Dallas is never a team that just kind of sits there and takes a guy who just is a kind of a safe guy. That's not something that they want to do. So I don't know if it's Dallas or if it's another team that you think makes a move upward, whether it's for a quarterback or for another position.
Well, I mean, I think it's Denver. Denver has a lot of really good pieces quietly, and also a really low win total at sports books. And if they can solve this quarterback problem, Drew Lock is not the answer. If they can solve this quarterback problem, whether it be with a slipping Justin Fields or a slipping Trey Lance a little bit, or even Mac Jones, I think that they absolutely need to be willing to do this. And I mean, their offensive line was badass last year. In Mike Munchak's second year, best offensive line coach in the league. Cortland Sutton's coming back to pair with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and Noah Fant, and their defense is going to be good with Vic Fangio. If they can solve this quarterback issue, I think that they could quietly, under your favorite position coach in the league, Eric Eager, Pat Shurmur, take the leap to be to be like a 10-win team, and their win total I think is like 7 or 7.
I can't believe Evan remembered this, but I was just going to bring up Pat Shurmur.
I can't believe it. I'm shocked. We can't make it through a podcast without the Chiefs or Pat Shurmur. It is a consistent
but Shurmur.
By the way, real quick,
go for it.
Their win total 7.5 plus 100. We've talked about both.
We bet over on that.
We've talked about both their win total and sneaky. They're to win the division. I think we talked about it 14-1. I know I have it.
It's too
14
much.
or 12-1.
If you bet the Chiefs to win the AFC West, you're playing Russian roulette at some point. But the thing that's interesting with that is Shurmur has quietly done decently with either young quarterbacks or quarterbacks who have like checkered past, right? Like, so he was the guy with Keenum in 2017 who did really well. The Giants offenses did better when he was there with Eli's broke ass than they did last year. Last year's offense wasn't very good, but Drew Lock's pretty bad. And then Sam Bradford, I mean, they improved like from like 32nd in points per game. When they got Bradford in 10, they were at 19. Like, they've improved. I'm not saying he's an elite play caller, but I do think he does better than people believe. And as you said, Evan, with an offensive line, Garrett Bowles went from unplayable to contract extension worthy, and they have all these other players that are going to be pretty good, I think, on the outside. Sutton coming back, the two tight ends.
They're getting back Juwan James at right tackle as well.
That too, and even like, and again, like, Melvin Gordon's not the best player at the position, but he's an okay receiver, and like, not they have talent.
Well, I mean,
that's
they
like
signed
relatively cheap.
their starting running back. They got Mike Boone.
That's
UC guy.
great point.
UC guy.
Who?
Thank you.
What is your take on the running backs? How many are we?
Oh
How many
my
are we
God,
seeing?
This is the worst running back class I have ever seen. I've been covering the NFL for like a decade and a half at this point. I have never. It's atrocious. I mean, there are three guys that I think are going to be starters, maybe, and then a whole lot of nothing. I mean, I actually, it was 2 days ago or Friday that I started looking at the back end running backs,
Dude, it's bad.
watching them and looking at their measurables and their production. I mean, horrible, man. I mean, just the worst running back class I have ever seen.
There are players in this class who are like productive in college that like were terrible athletes. So like that we don't have somebody in our college to pro system. We don't have a player registering in the 80th percentile or better athletically. The best athlete in the class is Elijah Mitchell, a 77.8 percentile athlete. Harris is 55 percentile. Williams 57. Trey Sermon, teach me, is 76 percentile. But then you got guys who people think are good, like Ramondre Stevenson, 5th percentile. Larry Roundtree, 2nd percentile. Even like Jarrett Patterson, who was a baller at Buffalo, 6th percentile. Like these guys, like Khalil Herbert, 16th percentile athlete at the position. It's Kenneth Gainwell, 19th percent.
Here's what I'm excited about, and I think Evan, you may be excited about this as well. Because if the Pittsburgh Steelers take Najee Harris in the first round, it will give me an opportunity once again to fade the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second straight season, and it will be
By the way,
glorious.
Evan did a great job just now giving out numbers that I thought were bettable, by the way. If you look, there is, I believe, let me make sure that this is still true. There is an arbitrage opportunity on the marketplace. Najee Harris is actually up a pick, but Najee Harris on DraftKings is 25.5, equal juice on both sides. I believe he's either 28 or 29.5 on FanDuel. So you have like a 3-pick middle there, which again, that's not trivial, right? And you're all about making good bets here. It's not a huge edge. None of those picks are that big of a percentage, but that's an opportunity that's afforded to you if you want to. I took under
ETN
29.
is going to be the first running back drafted. The Ramondre Stevenson guy, if you read Bob McGinn's scouting reports, which are reflective of NFL executives and scouts and all that, and they have some predictive value, they actually have him listed as a fullback. And some people have him as like the number 4 running back in the draft, and they have him as a fullback in Bob McGinn's scouting reports.
Our numbers really liked him until he tested.
Oh, his tests were
Awful.
abysmal.
You gotta get in the gym, Anyone that you think is going to be? I remember a couple years ago, it was like both Edmonds brothers made it in the first round, and we're like, wait, he had a brother. Who's anyone on your radar for a really surprise first round selection?
I think Eric Stokes, Georgia, cornerback, crushed his pro day, plays a really valuable position. He's a guy that could sneak in the back end of the first round.
He is plus 140.
He's also 86th percentile athlete, as Evan said. I like it. He's a better athlete from the test, although he might not be as Caleb Farley. What would you say that means? So the cornerback market was 3.5. When they first laid these, now it's 4.5. Are you over that at minus 124? Is that like something?
Yeah.
because it's a valuable position. The last few years, corner hasn't been as coveted in the first round, but we've seen the value of the passing games. Obviously, I think teams are taking notice there. That's one place where if you like an over offensive players bet, you're either assuming no safeties, somebody like Trayvon Moehrig goes in the second round, or something like running backs, one or two running backs go too, and you could still cash the over cornerbacks bet and also the over 18.5, whereas it is right now, offensive players bet.
Yeah, and I also think that in the back end of the first round, there's a bunch of teams that could draft a corner. The Packers, the Jaguars, the Jets. There's a bunch of cornerback needy teams late in the first round that I think could end up going to that position. It's a very valuable position.
Even Baltimore, because Baltimore right now is actually a favorite to take a defender, which you think about with their first pick, everybody's thinking wide receiver, or offensive tackle. But in reality, the Ravens do such a good job they don't ever draft for need because they don't ever have need. So they could take a corner there as well because, it's a 3-corner league and Humphrey and Peters are great, but Jimmy Smith and, they're getting older at the back half of that position. Tavon Young's never been able to stay healthy, all that kind of stuff. I like that shout there. Bills as well. Bills were starting Josh Norman there last year. Bills,
also Tampa Bay. I mean, the Bucs are going to have to decide on whether to pay Carlton Davis or Jamel Dean, or maybe they won't pay either of them, and they could go any which way at number 32. They could easily take a corner.
A couple others that I'll mention because I'm going to bet a few of these. The Eric Stokes I looked at. I like the ones that are plus money here. Jason Away is plus 100. And he's another guy whose measurables were insane. Now, I've heard people go, do you think he could be like the first edge defender taken? And I agree with you wholeheartedly that Jalen Phillips, from a production standpoint, Jason Away did not have production that NFL teams I think are going to get super excited about. But it's a weak class and it's a area of need for a lot of teams. And then you've got Asante Samuel Jr., who's also plus 100, another corner. I think both of those corners are going in the first round. Especially because it's just there are going to be teams that are going to say, I'm going to wait on receiver. I'm going to take a defensive player because there are not going to be any left the next time that I'm drafting. It's just going to happen. I want to close this out by saying we didn't have a combine this year, Evan, and it was sad because we didn't have a chance for you and Sean Payton to talk to one another again. So I'm looking forward to next year. Thank you, man, for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon. Check out Evan Silva at establishtherun.com. See you later, brother. As usual, special thanks to Evan. I knew he wasn't going to let you get out of there without talking about the Buffalo Bills. Brought that up right off the bat. But he's super plugged in, and so I thought it was really interesting to talk to him. Was there any major takeaway you had from either the Mac Jones conversation or anything else?
I think Evan is viewing the third pick very pragmatically, and I think if we've erred at all in that, it's that we haven't been very explicit about how pragmatic the bets that we've made are. I think he was very explicit about it. I like that. He said, if I had to do a mock draft, I would pick Mac Jones, which I think is fair given he's the favorite. But if I had to bet it, I would bet Trey Lance because he has the longest odds, and in a situation where nothing is known, you probably, of those 3 quarterbacks, want to take the one with the biggest number. As we did Friday, we currently have some Lance at plus 300 to go with Fields at plus 250. But I think the whole conversation is aired, and whether we've contributed to this or not is notwithstanding, is the Mac Jones thing is either a sure thing or no chance, right? And I think we've said things like, I can't see it. I can't see him thinking that way. But at the same time, what we're really trying to do is capitalize on a situation that is extremely uncertain. And I think Evan did a really good job of capturing that.
My big takeaway from it was his belief that it is not Justin Fields. And that is incredibly useful to know because he also said, I would take Justin Fields. So that you're getting someone that has thought this through, which is always what you get with Evan. But That's so interesting to me. And it again, talking about how, oh, well, the teams think this way, and you idiots who, live in the outer world don't know what you're talking about. That just is annoying. And it's not proven out by the way that players perform in the NFL. So, that to me rubs me the wrong way. If it does happen to be Mac Jones, and we may talk about this on our podcast next week, it doesn't mean that it was the right pick because Kyle Shanahan made it. That has to be made clear.
Yeah, and just because Kyle Shanahan is an extremely good coach does not mean he doesn't make mistakes. And I think that, I don't know, I will not be surprised when Jones is the pick on Thursday. I will also not be that shocked if it's Fields or Lance. I am of that belief currently. And I think maybe a week ago I would have been more shocked had it been Mac Jones. But given the way things have moved, Michael Silver had the long screed on Twitter about it. We have there's other outlets that, there are other people I talk to who think it's Lance. There are other people I talk to who are like, no one knows. Which if the no one knows camp has
any validity,
then Fields is way more of an option there than we believe. And I do think, again, the whole thing stands. What does Atlanta think, right? Because if Atlanta thinks that Fields or Trey Lance are going to be there at 4, you got to think they're thinking about moving the pick.
1,000%.
Which it doesn't look like they are, by the way.
I want to close out with this. Do you know what's happening tonight? It's this Sunday night for everyone listening.
It's like the Emmys or something like that?
The Oscars.
The Oscars, yeah.
All right, we haven't done it. Someone threw out a comment that was like, I missed the Quibi shows.
Oh, nice.
Okay, I didn't have a chance for Quibi shows. I did have a chance for Oscar nominations. Don't look them up. I want you to tell me if you think these are real movies or not.
Okay.
This is either an Oscar nomination for Best Picture or something that I have completely made up. Okay. First one, Judas and the Black Messiah.
That is a real movie.
It is.
Yep. I think I've heard that before.
Okay. Promising Young Women.
No, that's a movie.
It is a movie.
Yeah, I started watching that with my wife.
Okay. So far, you're 2 for 2.
The pandemic's really helping me here, right?
Because there
have been some Saturdays and Sundays, my friend, where there's
apparently.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Next one up. The Sound of Metal.
Sound of Music is a movie. Sound of Metal is not.
Wrong. It is a nomination for Best Picture. Next one.
It's not only a movie, but a nomination for Best Picture.
Next one. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Are you fucking with me? No.
No, but The Father is. There is a movie that is nominated for Best Picture called The Father. Last one here. The Trial of the Chicago. This is actually one.
Okay.
Chicago 7. Have you seen this one? I've heard it's good.
No, I want to, though.
I have not seen any of these, but this one has a really good cast. Here's the last one. Nomadland.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Damn it. You've seen all these movies. Mm-hmm. So this
Nomadland was actually...
I thought I was going to get you by literally just reading
one of my favorite
the names of them,
does
and it didn't
a
work.
recommendation at the... Which I think I think the issue is you and I work too much. We literally don't I'm trying to read more books now the off season's happening, but we're up till 2 a.m. every day. We just don't go to movies and but one of my favorite podcasts has a recommendation, a recommendation station at the end, and I'll generally speaking watch a movie that they say, and No Man Land, they loved it, and I actually, it's not my cup of tea per se, but I thought it was really good.
This is a first in the history of our podcast. You have seen movies nominated for Best Picture. I haven't. I looked at this list, and I don't even remember hearing about one of these
Well, it's a
movies.
weird year for cinema, right? Because they couldn't film a lot of it, and...
Strange.
Yeah.
I promise I will bring Quibi shows back. That is my promise to you.
When the draft, well, look, when we post draft, we got to like have a Quibi like brainstorm.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for hanging out. We'll be back next week. Enjoy the draft. See y'all.